This is your Thursday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Plenty to get to today. We'll have Velle E. Neal III joining me in just a little bit, columnist from the Star Tribune, talking through some Twins off-season news, the Major League Baseball lockout, part of that discussion with Velle, and Vikings playing tonight against the Steelers in a very must-win game. Got Lavelle's thoughts on Mike Zimmer, Rick Spielman, what Velle witnessed in Detroit on Sunday, whatever that was exactly. So good conversation with Velle. You won't want to miss that. Also be joined by Gophers volleyball setter Melani Shaffmaster. Gophers play Baylor in the round of 16 on Thursday afternoon. Should be a good one. Both those teams played each other earlier in the year. Baylor won in a very close 4-set match. Good insights from Melani Shaffmaster, so I hope you are interested in that as well. But first, what did I miss? Gophers men's basketball team, Timberwolves, both played on Wednesday. Both teams lost home games. That they lost isn't necessarily surprising. Gophers are going against Michigan State, a high-quality team. Same goes for the Wolves playing Utah, a very high-quality team. But it was how they lost that told a certain story. And I want to start with the Timberwolves. Wolves lost 136-104. Game was close for the first half, not particularly close after a run by Utah early in the second half. And after the game, interestingly, Anthony Edwards talking about Karl Anthony Towns and how he needs to go faster when he gets the ball so that opponents can't double team him. And basically Utah has started using this defense that the other teams in the league are copying, where they don't necessarily use their center to guard him. They use, the power forward to be the primary defender on him. In this case for Utah, it was Rudy Gobert over to double team him. Rudy Gobert, one of the best defensive players in the league. More on that in a minute. And other teams have kind of copied this, where you don't have to really account so much for the Wolves' power forward, who has typically this year been Jared Vanderbilt. Sometimes it's been Josh Okogie. Guys who aren't necessarily offensive threats. And Ant is saying, you got to go faster, Cat. Don't wait for the double team. Catch the ball and go, because you've got a defensive mismatch when the opponent is not using their best big on you. And within that was, seems to be some message like, come on, Cat, you're the best player. Do this thing. And it's another example of Edwards kind of taking charge of this team. He's telling Cat at halftime, you got to do this, you got to do that. A second-year player telling a seventh-year player what his deficiencies are, what the team needs out of him. And it's just interesting. I want to play the Edwards clip right now just so you guys can hear it with your own ears.
I told him at halftime, like, you waiting on the double. Like, you telling them, yeah, come double me. Now it's like, you're the best player on the floor. They take you out of the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, then when they double you, they not rotating. They stand with me and making everybody else beat you. So I just told him, like, you got to go quick. Like, if you watch, and I told him this, like, I told him this. I'm like, if you watch Joel Embiid play, you have to double Joel Embiid. Like, there's nobody in the league that can guard him. So he goes quick. Like, you can't double him because he catches and goes quick. Like, so I told Cat, like, you catch the ball and you holding it, like, you waiting for the double, like, telling them to come double me instead of just catching it and going. Like, they can't guard you. And I told him, like, it's disrespectful for them to put number 44 on me, bro. Like, that's disrespectful. So, yeah, he know. He know he got to kill all of them. Like, he's best player on the floor every night. He got to kill them.
I don't see this as like a schism or anything like that, if we might use that word from the Vikings past. It is interesting, though, to hear Edwards say that for him to be urging Towns on in that kind of way. And will be interesting to see how Towns takes that feedback. And by the way, Edwards and Patrick Beverley both running their mouths a whole lot about Rudy Gobert and how Gobert didn't guard Towns and how they don't necessarily fear Gobert. For a team that just lost by 32, that struck me as a little bit odd, maybe just blowing off some steam, whatever they were doing, trying to feel good about themselves. But that part of it felt odd. The part about Cat going faster on double teams absolutely makes sense and will be a key for this team going forward, no doubt about it. Yeah, as for the Gophers, they just, the talent deficit showed up on Wednesday. They won their first 7 games this season. They've been a really good story. Had Eric Curry on the podcast on Wednesday, played a quote from Ben Johnson talking about how this can't be the highlight of their season, the 7-0 start. And I think he sincerely believes that, and I think there will be more wins ahead. I think we've seen enough from this team that they will play hard, they will play with energy. They did that again on Wednesday. There's going to be some nights where they are outclassed in terms of talent, and I think that happened pretty obviously on Wednesday. Now, how they bounce back, that'll be the question. They've got to play Michigan next. Michigan will definitely have the talent edge, but when the Gophers play more similar or at least less talented than those two teams in the Big Ten, can they put together enough wins to make this season interesting as it goes along? I'm a believer more than I was certainly at the start of the year that they can do that, but we need to see it play out as the season goes along.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Happy to be joined today on Daily Delivery by Melani Shaffmaster, Gophers volleyball setter. Just named All-Region as of not too long ago. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited. It's an exciting time for the whole program right now. You guys are headed to Madison, and you'll be there for, facing Baylor in the Sweet 16 of volleyball, a foe you've played already this year. Just let's start with the match itself and kind of the anticipation of that going into it.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we'll be, like every other match we've played so far, we'll be focusing on ourselves and worrying about what we can do on our side of the net to play as best to Gopher volleyball as we can. And I think it is maybe a tad bit more exciting since we did play them in preseason at Wisconsin already, and we lost. So I think, obviously, that was early September into August, and our team has grown a lot since then. So I think that's a little bit of an exciting factor that we get kind of a rematch at the same exact place. But I think we're more prepared, and I think it's the same preparation that we've had for the Big Ten season so far. So
you say you've grown a lot since then. In what way?
I think our team, chemistry's gotten a lot better, and we've learned how we all operate better together and what we actually need to focus on instead of worrying about who we're playing or, obviously worrying about the scouting report, but knowing your assignments and how that can affect our connections on the court, I think, is overall a lot better than when we started at the beginning of the year.
You committed to the Gophers, I believe, as an 8th grader? Is that right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, a while ago.
How did you know at that age? I mean, I think a lot of people go through the recruiting process, maybe commit when they're a junior, even a senior. You're like, I'm an 8th grader, I'm a really good volleyball player, and this is where I want to go, even though you're from Indiana. How did that happen? Yeah,
so, the recruiting process started kind of really early for me, I guess, probably 7th grade. Into 7th grade is when I had a pile of letters, and I just knew I wanted to play in the Big Ten because growing up playing at Munciana, all the people I looked up to and stuff like that played in the Big Ten, and at the time it was still the best conference like it is now. And I was like, if I want to go and play professional or try and be with the USA national team, then I need to play in the best conference in the country. And I had my options. I did not want to stay close to home, so I was like, sorry, Mom and Dad, I don't want to be close to home. I don't know why. I just felt like that. And then I had a couple of visits, and then I contacted them, and I was like, I really am interested in you guys. And I started talking to Hugh and Laura and Matt, and then they set up a visit, and I came here, and I just I literally couldn't stop smiling. So then I talked to my parents about it, and I came back up here, and I was like, might as well. I know I want to go here, and I don't think it's going to change. So I was just like, might as well be done with everything early. And it was just a lot easier at that point.
That's great. And you've come here, and the experience has been really good so far, I would imagine. Has it kind of lived up to what you hoped so far?
Yeah, it definitely has. Even in COVID, I'm still playing Big Ten volleyball under Hugh, Matt, and Laura, and I'm still training with some of the best athletes in the country that are not only good athletes but great people. And I think it's just overall it's exceeded my expectation, and I've still only been here for 2 semesters.
Have you always known you wanted to be a setter? Because, I mean, you're fairly tall. You're 6'3". That's tall for a setter from what I'm not a volleyball expert, but I've watched enough of it to know setters don't tend to be the tallest players on the court. How do has that always been your position, and how did you gravitate to that spot?
Yeah, so I earlier when I was playing volleyball, I think it was 12s or something, our setter got hurt and they just kind of threw me in there, and I was like, okay, I'll just do this. And then I think after I got thrown in there, other pieces of the puzzle for our younger club team kind of fit better. So I just stayed in that position as me and my friends kept going up, being on the same team throughout the years of Munciana, and then I ended up growing. So it just happened, kind of.
So you weren't that tall when you started that?
No.
How much did you grow?
I think in 6th to 7th grade, probably between 6th and 8th grade, I grew about a foot. I was. Yeah, and then I haven't grown that much since freshman year of high school.
But I mean, you're 6'3", so you don't have a whole lot more to grow, right?
So yeah, perfect height right now. So I'm just gonna stay here. No,
again, like I said, I'm not a volleyball expert, but watching volleyball and just watching the setter work, I've always gotten the impression that it's a little bit of art and a little bit of science to kind of spreading the ball around and kind of knowing where to go with it. It's moving really fast. How do you describe the position that you play?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of, I think obviously you need skill to do it, but I think maybe I'll do 40% skill and then 60% of mental ability to know what's happening around you all the time with all your people. Because when I first got here, that's what I struggled with in the spring, and it got better in the spring, and it's gotten a ton better in this semester. But I think being able to allow yourself to know you're not going to make the right decision every single time is probably a hard part, because yeah, you're in this position right now on the court, but this is the only ball you can set. It might not be the best decision, but that's all you have in the moment. And so, all you can do is go back and watch film and be like, hey, I should have went here and here. And then probably another really big part of being a setter in this conference at this level is preparing before the match. I talk with Matt all the time, and we normally know which blockers are on, who's been on at practice all week, hitting numbers, blocking percentages, and stuff like that. So I think setting is a lot more mental than people give it credit, and it's a lot of preparation before even you actually play the match.
That makes sense. And do you think, do your friends and stuff, do they understand how complicated what you do is?
Yeah, I think we all have our own definitions of complicated, because if I was trying to be Jenna, I would not be able to do anything she's probably doing right now, because I've never been a hitter, and I think if she tried to do what I was doing, it would be just as hard. So I think they understand it's difficult, but I think what they do is difficult. So I think all of it's difficult, but it's a variety of definitions with that, I think.
You guys swept Stanford to get to this point. Obviously, like we talked about, Baylor, you played them earlier this year. It was really competitive, and you guys have grown since then. Could be, you don't want to look too far ahead, but it could be Wisconsin after that if you win this match. As you're thinking about tough opponents and just how you guys are playing, what are some of the keys for you this weekend?
Yeah, I think, as always, it's going to be focusing on our side and connecting with each other and understanding that a point is a point, no point is worth 3 points, and no point is worth a half point, that we need every single one to win this game and hopefully the rest of the games we end up playing in the next couple weeks. And I think, obviously, understanding and following our scouting report and just being disciplined and clean, if we're talking about actual volleyball piece of it, not just our mental and team connection side, is going to be a huge key against Baylor on Thursday.
Melani Shaffmaster, thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Thank you.
Now, I thought that was an interesting glimpse into a setter's life from Melani Shaffmaster. Really enjoyed chatting with her the other day. Gophers play Baylor 2 p.m. today, and that is on ESPNU if you have that channel and are interested in watching. Winner advances to potentially play Wisconsin with a trip to the Final Four on the line. So that would be something. These regionals in Madison, so that would be a home game for the Badgers should the Gophers get past Baylor, and should Wisconsin advance as well. Wisconsin plays UCLA in the other regional semifinal today. So interesting, great program the Gophers have. They get this far a lot. Can they get any further this year? A lot of it will depend on what happens with their offense today. Happy to have Velle E. Neal III back on Daily Delivery. Velle, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
I'm good. I bet you're doing better now that you're not in Detroit. I know the Vikings are better now that they're not in Detroit, but you were there Sunday to witness. I've talked about this. I feel like it was stunning yet predictable. I feel like Vikings fans saw that game coming kind of all week, but still a loss to the previously winless Lions. So I want to get your thoughts on that and some Twins thoughts too. But, like I said, let's start with the Vikings and just, being there. What was what were your takeaways from, being in that moment and watching everything unfold?
Yeah, it was pretty disturbing. And Mike, you've been in these press boxes during these events where we're sitting there trying to make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes about the angles we're writing for the next day's paper. So, we're in discussions in the fourth quarter about what are you going to write when the Vikings win. So I was going to write that you have to take a victory any way you can get it and just get the hell out of town sometimes. That was going to be my angle because it looked like the Vikings were going to come back and win that game. When Cousins hit Jefferson with the pass, I thought, okay, they're going to win. Who knew that the lowly Lions are going to drive down the field, have two plays in which players should have been kept in bounds, but they got out of bounds. And then Zimmer is afraid to pull the trigger on a blitz once he got in the red zone. I mean, if Monty Kiffin's coaching the Vikings, he is sending 3, 4, 5 guys because his belief was when you're defending your red zone, you have a smaller field to cover. You should be more encouraged to blitz instead of dropping 8 in the coverage. And I just thought that was a tactical blunder by the coach's part. And then you also are asking Cameron Dantzler to play coverage skills, which he's not good at. If anything, you should have blitzed Dantzler just to keep him away from screwing up in the somewhere in the secondary. But no, so then I had to change my angle, which I wasn't happy about. And I just arrived at the conclusion that was the type of game that gets people fired. And I'm not just talking about Zimmer, but I'm also talking about Spielman, who has presented Zimmer this roster. And I think this started 2 years ago when they gutted the defense and Zimmer's had to try to deal with young, inexperienced players like Cameron Dantzler ever since. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Vikings finish up this season. They have 5 games. They're probably going to need to go 4-1 to finish 9-8 and be a playoff team. And if they don't, and there's a good chance that they won't, the Wolves are going to sit back and think about how the season's transformed. You can say everybody has injuries, everybody has slumps, but good teams find a way around this stuff. And they almost got swept by the Lions in the season series because it took Greg Joseph to hit a 53 or 54-yard field goal at U.S. Bank Stadium to walk off the Lions in. So the tentacles from this loss are all over the place.
I agree. I like the sentiment that that's the kind of game that can get people fired. You've been around, you've covered the Twins for more than 2 decades. You've got experience covering other teams. You've been around, teams outside of baseball, obviously, before taking on this columnist role. But, the team you've been around the most is the Twins, and you've seen really good seasons and really bad seasons from them. What I'm curious about is you talked about this Thursday game that's coming up against Pittsburgh, which is another opportunity to be resilient. But this team, at a certain point, teams do sometimes run out of resiliency. What kind of Vikings team do you think we see Thursday? Have they emptied the tank so much that they can't fill it up again and try to rally one more time and get themselves in the playoff race? Or is this a team that will be remembered as, still more resilient and able to kind of dust themselves off again?
Well, I know that Mike Tomlin is getting some pats in the back about how he's got the Steelers in contention. I've watched them play 2 or 3 times this year, and this team can't be had. Okay, the Bears and Justin Fields put pressure on the Steelers at Pittsburgh a few weeks ago. I think that was a Thursday night game. I think so. And so the secondary is vulnerable. The Vikings should be able to have air superiority over the Steelers and throw the ball down the field, which Zimmer has actually encouraged Kirk Cousins to do so. They will have a few players back in the lineup. Patrick Peterson's off the COVID list. Barr and Kendricks both were full participants in practice yesterday. So they're going to have some reinforcements in that lineup. So this team's primed for a response on Thursday, and I kind of expect them to win at home against Pittsburgh.
What if we don't see a response? What if they've had some of these, dead man walking games before. I feel like the game against Indianapolis a few years ago where they'd kind of gotten themselves back to the brink of the mix after some disappointment. They just got absolutely humbled in that game. What if they go out and lay an egg Thursday? Would you say, Ben Gessling on X's Vikings said he doesn't think any changes would be imminent, that they would ride out the storm. But you can also see the case for sending a message, especially since the next game isn't until a week from Monday.
It depends. It depends what the ownership group, the Wolf family, believes needs to be fixed on this squad. If you need to make wide sweeping changes and gut the entire coaching staff and look in the front office and look at Spielman, then that's something that probably should take place during the offseason or maybe the day after the regular season ends. But if you just think that Zimmer's the issue, then, if they lose on Thursday, then, maybe you have a reason to call Zimmer into your office a day or two later and have a difficult conversation with him. But I do think the Vikings' problems are deeper than Zimmer. I think there's issues with Kubiak, the offensive coordinator. Like I said, Spielman should not be absolved from any blame here. So if the Vikings are going to make changes, I think it's going to be more sweeping than just sacking the coach. I think it's going to have to be deeper than that. So, but I think Thursday's game is pretty big. If I'm an owner, I want to see how they respond after losing to the worst team in football. And if I'm not satisfied with that response, then now I'm shortlisting guys to replace multiple people.
It feels like this season just never really got fully on track. They've just been kind of chasing all sorts of things from the beginning of the year, whether it was, training camp, injuries and, the COVID stuff with Kirk Cousins, and then they lose their first two games. They've always managed to kind of steady themselves and get back to 500 a couple times, but they've been kind of chasing this season kind of from the jump. And it feels a little bit, as we think about it in retrospect, feels a little bit like the 2021 Twins season as well, when they just got off to that bad start and could never quite fully recover. Let's transition a little bit to Twins talk right now, because they made a couple of moves right before the lockout. They signed Dylan Bundy, move I'm not high on at all. They signed Buxton to an extension, which I think was a really good decision. I want to get your takes on both of those moves and kind of the standstill that we're at right now that this lockout probably is going to be here for at least a couple months.
Well, Dylan Bundy had some shoulder problems last year and he had a 6 ERA. And in my mind, I would not count on him until he comes to spring training and proves that he's healthy and can pitch effectively, because the arm is good. I mean, he could touch 97 with his fastball, and he's got a really good slider. And those are tools to work with. And he's a guy who could be someone who is a good mid-rotation starter, or maybe a number 2 guy. But I'm not going to believe that Dylan Bundy exists until he proves it to me in spring training. I think it's very disappointing that the Twins did not get involved in some of these other free agents that signed around the league. I thought Marcus Stroman would be a really good fit for them. He is kind of like Jose Barrios, in which he has no offseason. He's always working out. He's been durable, and he's been an effective pitcher. And he would be worth $23 million a year over 4 years, or whatever he got from the Cubs. Some of these other guys you could look at and say the Twins could have went after, like Kevin Gausman or someone like that. But I think there's a couple of guys they should have jumped in on harder. So now what disturbed me is that Derek Falvey came out and said we're actually looking more toward trading for starters than signing him. And I said, okay, well, that's concerning here, because you had a flock of decent starting rotation guys available in the free agent market. I think they should have taken a harder look at some of those guys. And now it's going to come down to crafting a trade. So it looks like some good prospects are going to have to be packaged here to get a quality arm. So I don't know how they're going to me, they need to add 3 more starters in addition to Bundy, because you can't get through a season with just a 5-man rotation. You need 8 or 9 guys to get you through a season. So I'm curious to see what they're going to add from this point on. As for Buxton, had to be done. I was skeptical that the Twins were going to sign him once talks broke down at the trade deadline, because I thought offering him 7 years and $80 million was an insult. But what I underestimated was Buxton's desire to stay with the Twins organization. And when you have a player who's willing to do that, you always have a chance of reaching a deal with him. And the Twins came up with a creative way to keep Buxton in the Twins uniform. I'm not a fan of bonuses tied to BBWAA votes. I wrote about that last week. But, from the Twins' point of view, it got the deal done. So bravo for them for keeping an immensely talented kid in their lineup.
I want to circle back on the pitching, too. I mean, you said 3 more starters, and I agree with that because if the other 2 you're penciling in have no body of work. I mean, Bailey Ober and Joe Ryan looked good at the end of last year, but that was all we've seen of them in a Major League uniform. Like, guys regress all the time after their first initial burst.
Yeah, and, you've got a crop of arms. You've got Josh Winder, and you've got Yoan Duran, you have Jordan Balazovic, Cole Sands. You got a bunch of guys who are at that AA, AAA level who could contribute at some point during next year, but you're not really sure. And I hate to bring this up, but if Balazovic and Yoan Duran continue to have injury setbacks, they are not going to build up the endurance to be a starting pitcher. They may have to end up moving to the bullpen because I don't think either one of those guys have thrown 130, 140 innings in a year. I got to go look it up, but I don't think they have. And that's concerning. Yes, the Twins have some young, promising arms, but I would not count on them. I wouldn't count on them to be my first 7 or 8 pitchers in my pecking order as I'm trying to put together a rotation. And let's not forget, everything the Twins did last year in terms of assembling a rotation backfired on them in terms of their Shoemaker and J.A. Happ. And who saw Maeda getting injured? That was unfortunate. I think we may have to prepare for the return of Michael Pineda the way things are going.
Which would be okay. I mean, you kind of know what you're getting there. When healthy, he's been a pretty good pitcher for them, or at least, a guy that you can pencil in at that, number 3, number 4 spot. He's not number 5 star. He's better than that, but he's certainly not top of the rotation either. And, final point on that. I mean, they can't do anything now because there's this lockout, and that, it's coming at a bad time for them because they need a lot of help.
It's going to be musical chairs once this lockout ends, as far as teams finding players and players finding teams. I don't know who has the advantage in that mess, but it's going to be crazy once they do sign a deal and figure out what rules of engagement they're going to play by in terms of free agency and compensation and things like that. And it's going to be a while, Mike. I got a feeling that this lockout's going to go into late March, and we're going to have a delay to the start of the regular season. The players are dug in about how they want things to change. They're upset that the average salary has gone down. They're upset that a player making the minimum salary 5 years ago took home more money than the guy making the minimum salary last season. I think they're only getting 47% of revenue when it used to be 52%. So they've got an axe to grind. And they got this lead negotiator named Bruce Meyer, who is combative. He's combustible. He's acerbic, and it's not going to be pleasant. So I think this is going to take a while.
Final thought, a little bit more pleasant. Guys who played when the money wasn't quite as good as it is now, Tony Oliva and Jim Cott, both elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in through the the committee that kind of goes back and takes a look at maybe some guys that were overlooked by Hall of Fame voters, in the regular vote. Just your thoughts on that process. And everybody loves Tony Oliva, but what do you know? What are your memories or thoughts of Tony as you've known him over the years with the Twins?
Well, I have to imagine. I didn't know him as a player, and I wasn't in the clubhouse when he was a player. But to me, he had to be like the ultimate chemistry glue guy because he's always smiling, he's always being positive, he always patting guys on the back. I was telling a story yesterday about Carlos Gomez at batting practice, just spewing profanities in English and Spanish during batting practice because he wasn't making solid contact. And Tony, going around the cage and putting his hand on Gomez's shoulder, trying to get him to calm down and tell him you cannot hit if you're upset, and and just tried to calm him down. And I just think, Tony had to be one of the greatest teammates ever just because of his demeanor and his positivity and his ability. And he was a fantastic hitter. His first 8 years as a player were rather remarkable. And his ability to make adjustments, in-game adjustments, a bat to a bat, he would open up his stance, close his stance. If he was facing some guy who threw hard, he would open up to the opposite field and just hit the ball the other way. He wasn't afraid to do that. He was a very smart, cerebral, intelligent hitter. And I'm glad he's getting his day in the sun. And it's the same thing for Jim Cott. 16 Gold Gloves, durability, was 25-12 one year, won 283 games in his career. Just a model of professionalism and one of the best analysts in the game. His ability to articulate the game is second to none, and I'm thrilled. It's just amazing how 5 years ago I was at the winter meetings when sitting there waiting to hear the results of the vote on by the Veterans Committee, and they said 2 players missed it by 1 vote, Dick Allen and Tony Oliva, and my jaw dropped. I didn't know that Tony was going to get that close. And Cott missed it by 2 votes that year. That's the last time they were voted on until now. So Cott gets in, Tony gets in, and Dick Allen still misses by 1 vote. So that's really interesting. I also have to get a shout out to Buck O'Neil, who I knew from my days in Kansas City, former Negro League player, manager, the first African-American scout in Major League Baseball history. As a scout, he signed Lou Brock, Lee Smith, and Joe Carter.
Wow.
His contributions to the Ken Burns documentary, Baseball, were second to none. Just loved and revered across the league for his ability to tell us the story of the Negro Leagues. And he is definitely a treasure. And I wish he was still smelling the roses so he can kind of take his victory lap after being voted in.
Absolutely. That's a great point. A wonderful Joe Posnanski book on Buck O'Neil as well, The Soul of Baseball, that I read a number of years ago. And that was not sort of my introduction to him, but really kind of brought home what he meant to the game. So great points there, Lavelle. Great points overall. As always, love to have you on the show. Let's do this again soon, okay?
Absolutely.
Good catching up with Lavelle, and that brings me to the cooler. By the way, talking Vikings with Lavelle at SK_TPC. Saw this tweet the other day. Apologies if it's been somewhere else as well. For what it's worth, barring any setbacks, Thursday will be the first time Michael Pierce, Dalvin Tomlinson, Eric Kendricks, and Anthony Barr will be playing together in a game. Much needed against a team that has a very good rushing attack. Time to see these boys eat. Wow, I hadn't really thought about that in that context, that they've been missing those guys in tandem. It really does influence their run defense, the middle of the field. We'll see if that makes a difference against Pittsburgh. Not every team can expect perfect health, but having all 4 of those guys on the field at the same time can't be anything but a boon to the Vikings in a must-win game. That'll do it for me today. Chris Hine will be on Friday's show to talk a little bit more Timberwolves, and very much we will talk Vikings on Friday's show coming off that Thursday game against the Steelers. Thanks for joining me here today. I'm Michael Rand. We'll be back at it on Friday.